Hi, and welcome to Couch Theater. Before we start the episode, I just want to let you know that we are now on Reddit, and while I'm doing my episodes, I write everything out on a chalkboard just to keep things straight because I get pretty distracted while I'm doing the podcast. So this is a way to keep my notes and my head straight while I'm recording. And so if you're interested and you want something just a little bit more supplemental to go with the episode, in the first half, I have 2 boards that go together to help you follow along. And then in the second half, where you've already watched the movie, you're coming back for the spoiler section, I have 2 more boards. And so if you're interested, you can go to Reddit at Couch Theater and follow along. Thanks, and enjoy the episode. Hi, welcome to Couch Theater. I'm Stefan, and here what we're trying to do is basically get more people to watch more movies and enjoy them for what they are, which is just fun, applicable to ourselves, that make us think and talk. Anyways, my guest today here is Tyler.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about A Dark Song.
A Dark Song.
Which is on Netflix right now. And it's a horror. It's kind of fantastical too. But what I like about it is, even though it's considered horror, it's not like horror like jump scares. It's creepy.
That is what the orange words on the board in front of me have been telling me.
Yes, that's true. I have a board with all of the information on it, so I don't lose track because I'm very scatterbrained.
It allows me to show up completely unprepared, having absolutely no context for what this movie is, aside from these couple of words he's got up here on the board. And that's not seen as being flippant or lazy. It's actually being seen as contributing exactly as intended and requested.
Well, and it's important to note that Tyler has not seen this movie before. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, prime you about it, and then we're going to go watch the movie. And then we're going to come back and see what we thought.
Prime away.
Yeah. So, like I was saying before, it's a horror movie, but it's not like a jump scare. It's creepy. And there's this tension that's constantly building. It reminds me of The Exorcist. If you've seen The Exorcist,
yes,
there are a couple like jump scares. There's that moment where she walks down the stairs backwards. So and I when I first watched that, I was in high school, and I was home alone, and I paused it, and I walked out of the room. I had to take a break because it was just so scary.
So here's my background on this movie. Is I saw it when I was really young, like 8 or something like that.
The Exorcist.
Yes. Something about this movie, I think maybe I was too young to care about the things that made it scary. Now, when I was about 8, The Mummy scared me because there were bugs that, ran after you and ate you right away.
Yeah.
And it was horrifying because you couldn't do anything. They just didn't seem to be stoppable whatsoever. It was just it was like lava with teeth. Like
get under your skin, and it was just over.
Yeah, that's horrifying to an 8-year-old. This little girl screaming horrible obscenities about what your mother does in hell. That doesn't really scare an 8-year-old. This movie was actually kind of funny to me, especially with the things like the vomiting. That was like something you'd see on Nickelodeon.
Yeah. All right.
So I don't know if I can translate that quite as well. And in fact, that's kind of how I approach movies like this. Like I noticed you have written up there, really no likable characters.
Yeah. So there's 2 characters, and the basic gist of the movie is there's a woman named Sophia who is grief-stricken about something, and she's turning to this guy who is a self-proclaimed wizard. It makes it sound absurd, but she's turning to him for help, and they're going to do a ritual to do something, and we'll learn about that in the movie. But yeah, they're not likable. They're both assholes, honestly. And it whenever you think you like one of them for something, it just kicks you for that.
I feel like I'm going to be fine with that, but I may wind up finding this movie kind of funny. just kind of based on what I've read so far. That doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be creepy. I think that funny and creepy are things that can exist side by side, depending on the atmosphere, just depending on all the variables involved. Yeah. The Evil Dead remake is a pretty good example of that, I think.
Okay, I did not see the Evil Dead, wow. like the most recent one.
Yes.
I just remember seeing the commercials, and it looked like a really scary movie.
It was a scary roller coaster ride.
A scary roller coaster ride of ridiculousness, or
sort of, yeah. It was like think what would happen if you gave the Sam Raimi license to a Sam Raimi fan who was just all about him in art school, because that's what they did. And this movie is an extremely artistic and interesting, but at the same time, just as childishly playful of a horror movie as the original Evil Dead movies were.
Okay.
This is probably one of the tangents that's going to wind up getting cut out.
Probably, yeah.
But I feel like this kind of context is also helpful just to establish more of a rapport between the two of us about what I'm thinking going into horror movies. Because they're such artistic endeavors. They just go in so many more different ways, I think, than most genres do.
Well, and like we talked about before, I mean, as far as all movies go, I mean, everybody experiences it a different way, and as humans participating in this organic thing, it changes every time somebody interprets it or sees it, or just experiences it in a different way. It becomes that thing. So, horror is a really interesting genre, and I love it a lot. I'm loving it more and more, and specifically now, I mean, there's a lot of new horror coming out that's interesting. Okay, so because this movie is about the fantastical and magic, I know of a couple people who actually listen to the show that I talk to who don't like the fantastical. It turns them off. Like, oh, it's not real. I'm not interested. You know who you are. This movie, I feel like you can go and look at it one of two ways. You can see it as magic, which actually it has this like religious element to it, which is interesting. It's like magic based on religion, specifically like Christian biblical stuff, and makes it into the magical. Or you can see it as madness, everything they experience as not magic, but inside of their own minds. And if you can, I think it would be cool to see it both ways. But if, you're like, I like magic, I want to see it as magic, well, then see it that way. But if you can't see it as magic, you hate the fantastical, well, just see it as madness. And I think you'll really get a kick out of it either way, because it completely changes what the movie is. It really changes the feeling of the movie and the ending.
I will definitely give you some credit for how effective these notes are at kind of putting you in the right frame of mind. I feel like I'm back in high school English class about, talking about some new book we're going to read, and the teacher tells you to think about, certain social issues or concepts beforehand, and then you sit there and you hammer them out for hours and hours together as a class. But this is something that I actually have enjoyed doing. Like, we don't really look at that. A lot of people won't have conversations like this and talk about things in that depth and actually outline what they're going to talk about the way that you would in school. But I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that it's extremely helpful, especially if you want to create something that's as structured and helpful as this podcast kind of seems like it tends to be.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I love movies and literature in general, and I feel like once you start pulling it apart, you really gain more of an appreciation for it and start to love it. And I think that can be compared to any other profession or area of study, like music. I play bass, and I can tell you that even the most like mundane, boring songs, if I learn the bass line for them, all of a sudden it becomes like one of my new favorite songs, because there's just so much going on underneath the surface. And there are other people out there that I've talked to who they don't like movies, or they don't like going to or watching movies. And I feel like if you talked about them a little bit more or started like pulling them apart a little bit more, or you go with a friend and you talk about them, all of a sudden it becomes something incredible.
My friend Patrick has had his standard for movies increased recently because he doesn't really go see movies unless I kind of get up his butt about it and we go like, we gotta go see this movie.
Okay.
Because I know him. I've known him for like over 10 years, and we have a certain rapport with movies, and I understand exactly what kind of movie he is going to be into. So he just kind of doesn't go see movies unless I tell him to, and that means he only ever sees movies that he loves. So now
okay. And what kind of movies does he love? Is he like an action?
Sort of. Sometimes. It depends on what kind of action, because he's not so simple as to be, really jazzed about like a Transformers movie. There's got to be something to it. The movies that I've taken him to see over the years are that I've actually specifically pulled him in and just been like, you have to watch this movie, would be Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
It's one of my favorites, yeah.
Mad Max Fury Road. Mm-hmm. Logan. The newest King Kong movie, the one with the monsters.
Oh, yeah. That was such a weird movie.
Oh, my God, that movie was dope. It was super weird, but that's what I want. I like weird if you can pull it off in a way where it's entertaining. If you can pull off entertaining and weird at the same time, that's like favorite movie time right there.
I think of when I was thinking about your list, I was thinking about Dredd and John Wick.
I don't think I've shown him Dredd, but I feel like he would love that.
I love that movie so much.
That movie is really great.
I just think of Dredd all the time and just those faces. You're like, ugh.
He's just doing the Stallone mouth.
Yeah, exactly. He must have practiced in the mirror so much. All right, so as you can see on the board, so purification is important in the ritual aspect, which you'll get into that. And I think as a final note, the last two final notes is on purification, what does it mean to be pure? And does that mean freedom from illusions, only seeing the truth? And what does it mean to be pure? And then next is forgiveness. Forgiveness is really important in this movie, and we'll definitely talk about that a lot when we come back after the movie. So the second question would be, what is forgiveness? There are different levels, different types of forgiveness. What does it mean to forgive someone?
I will say that the common theme between those two concepts right off the bat is that neither one of them inherently matters. You can write off both of those things if you just are that kind of person. So that's just interesting to me that this.
Okay, you got to explain that.
Who cares if I'm free from sin? Fuck your standards.
Okay.
The same with forgiveness. Who cares if you forgive me? Like that's just somebody who just has that kind of a callous attitude can completely ignore both of those themes.
Okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it from like a personal level as far as, do I want to be pure or do I want forgiveness? No, I don't care. So I don't care what people think. And so purity and forgiveness are inconsequential to my existence.
Those thoughts are kind of colored by the fact that you already have written up there really no likable characters. So I'm just kind of assuming, like, I don't know, I'm going into this just picturing two amorphous assholes. And if there's some level of purification or forgiveness needing to be exchanged between them, or maybe between somebody else, there could be potential that maybe I just assume it doesn't matter. Movies are all about characters' motivations. Well, art in general, I feel, is all about character motivations. So if I determine that a character maybe might not actually give a shit, I don't know, that just maybe it could play with those themes. I don't know. I know zero things about this movie. I may be completely way off base.
So it is actually the exact opposite.
Cool.
Purification is very important and forgiveness is very important in the movie, what it means on an individual level. But also, I think we were talking about, the difference between religion and psychology. Like, is this a movie about magic or is this a movie about madness? How are those different in terms of forgiveness on a religious basis or on a human basis? How is forgiveness different in that respect? I think I'll leave it at that. And we're going to go watch A Dark Song on Netflix now. So at this point, we're going to pause. And you should be pausing too. And you're going to go watch A Dark Song on Netflix and then meet us back in a sec. All right, so we're back. Now you get to look at the other two squares.
Oh, I know. And like, I feel like that's almost dumped out all the stuff that I said I was thinking about.
Yes.
Because now
Excellent.
I'm ready to argue now, and it's great.
Ooh, argue. Yes. Excellent.
Well, I mean, I honestly, what I would want to start with, based on the discussion that we had before we watched the movie, there was something I was thinking about, but I didn't vocalize.
Okay.
And so if anybody has just gone on and just soldiered straight through and not paused and watched the movie, it does have an ending. That is something about movies like this that you kind of have to look out for. Sometimes
they just end.
Sometimes they just end. Sometimes,
and it's supposed to be profound, like, wow.
Yes. Or other times, the ending, you don't really quite understand what the finished state of it is. And this was a common criticism of Witch, or The Witch, I think it was.
Yeah.
Where it just, it for a lot of people, it just kind of felt like stuff was happening until it was over. Mm-hmm. And that is not the case with this movie. It is... There is a definite ending, and I think that is worth noting if you're kind of on the fence about actually watching this movie.
I'll say the first time I watched it, I loved everything up until the very ending. Like her wish, I'm like, she wishes for forgiveness. Like, what the f*** is that? You know, forgiveness? And then I started, peeling it apart. I'm like, okay. I like that a little bit more. I don't know. How did you feel about that?
Oh, I thought it was great. We can get to the point about personal forgiveness later, but that actually kind of helped absolve her character for me. How we talked about how there are two unlikable characters. Mm-hmm. Seeing her go through what she went through under this banner of vengeance. Sorry, now I'm feeling like I have to unpack like several different ideas that are all layered on top of each other. Because originally I went into this movie like thinking of your typical themes that you think of in movies where it's a mother in a horror situation. Movies like, Rosemary's Baby, Exorcist, even Child's Play. Like movies where the relationship between a mother and a child is like a core pillar of what makes the movie a movie. Where that kind of actually isn't really the thing in this movie. It's there. That's what she's after, but her motherhood is never really put as like the forefront. There's really not a whole lot of symbolism to do with motherhood. And in fact, one of the very few moments you get where they interact between the mother and the child is when she tears up her photo, which most plainly to me looks like a destruction of ego. So it's almost like an intentional subversion of, I think that motherhood is often used because it's a very relatable and obvious kind of emotional pillar to attach your horror to. You jeopardize motherhood, you jeopardize that bond that's scary on a primal level to us. And this movie almost like wanted to distance itself from that because it wants to do something different.
Oh, I like that. I mean, that motherhood was taken from her, right? Like she says earlier in the film, like, to her sister, you have a family, I have a whole. Yeah. And so we don't get to see her as a mother because she's not a mother anymore. She doesn't see herself as a mother because she blames herself for everything that happened. And that picture, I mean, she rips it apart, right? It's a picture of her and her son, but she's not that person anymore. And she can't imagine herself as that person because it just brings up all of this guilt. And so she rips out the part of herself that was love. She's gone from that picture because she hates herself, and all that's left is her son, right? Yeah. So she's not doing it for herself. And I think that's where we get into some conflict. So we talked about, purity, like the ritual requires purity to work and truthfulness. And so they cleanse themselves physically and mentally, and they set their intentions. But both Sophia and the wizard Joseph, they're not completely honest with each other. Joseph is a little bit more honest with his intentions, but Sophia lies the entire movie.
Well, he's a little dishonest with one of his intentions, and man, that's a trick you can only pull once, and boy, does he pull it.
He kept it in his pants, right?
Yeah, technically. That's a different topic. No, what you're talking about. I think ultimately that's the difference between the two characters, is that she doesn't do so verbally, but I guess it's just kind of maybe a projection on my part, or maybe the audience's part. Maybe you're supposed to project this onto her. The idea of just wanting it to be over and kind of turning yourself over to it. Mm-hmm. Whereas he was like, let's just keep doing it. Let's just keep trying. And he never really had any sort of indication that he was going to resolve his own truth. Whereas I guess you could say she silently resolved her own truth. I don't know. Do you feel like she ever does really come? I mean, she does to him, I guess. Then that's the only moment. Is there a moment after that, do you think, where she earns things a little bit more?
You mean earns that ending where she gets to talk to her angel?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I was really to pull that apart, in the beginning, she says, okay, well, I love someone and they don't love me anymore. Well, it's her son, and her son is dead. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Which is a horrible way of putting it, by the way.
Yeah.
Doesn't love me because I got him killed.
Talk about half-truths. I mean.
Oof.
And then she says, okay, I'm doing this for vengeance. I want vengeance against the killers. And although she doesn't explicitly state it, she talks about it to herself, and she blames herself for the death of her son. And she's constantly saying sorry to her son. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. She never really says sorry to herself. I don't think she ever thinks about herself. She's constantly thinking about her son and about the killers, and she wants vengeance. And it's not until the very end where she's running for her life. She's running to escape for herself. And she's saying, I'm sorry to herself, I think. And so that's where she earns it in my mind, is she finally starts thinking about herself. I mean, not in a selfish way, like, I'm alive. How am I going to move on with my life?
Yeah, I think it would be a tangent to follow up on the idea that I was originally thinking of when you got on that train.
Okay.
Because I was thinking more of like the idea of both forgiveness and vengeance are both selfish ideas. Even though they're centered on other people, it's a personal desire. But yeah, you're right though. Having that forgiveness for yourself and actually feeling somewhat sorry for yourself and admitting it's for yourself is kind of like one of those first steps towards healing.
I'm thinking about Scott Pilgrim, which you said earlier, and it's like he pulls the sword out of his chest. Scott earned the power of self-respect.
Yeah. That was the self-respect ending.
Yeah. I think that's why the ritual ends up completing, because she's never truthful, completely truthful. And then finally at the very end, she is. And that's where things finally come together. We can start talking about, do you believe the magic really happened, or was it all in her mind?
I can see both sides of it, but the magic not being real and all of it being in her mind would be such a crazier movie.
Right?
That would make everything way weirder.
Like, it would be a terrible twist if, they end the movie and she's in like a mental asylum the whole time.
Oh my God.
I feel like there's been movies like that where, nothing was real.
Sucker Punch.
Like, whoa, no, that would have been pretty lame.
No, yeah. The horrible real version I was imagining, the idea of it just being madness, is that these two people really did spend however many months, which they disagreed on how many months. Clearly, nobody was keeping track of time, which I thought would be important in a ritual, but I guess not.
Well, like they said, I mean, they're looking outside. Oh, I think it's raining outside. And he's like, doesn't matter. The outside world is inconsequential right now.
For sure.
Yeah. I love that moment where he's like, hey, by the way, I'm going to unchain the house from the world. So, you know.
She really doesn't give it like even like I would have like at least walked back and forth through that door a couple times before he closed it. You know, it just seems weird to just be like, no, yeah, that was it. I'm good. I'm ready. I need to stretch a little bit first. I get so claustrophobic so fast.
Well, he needed that, right? He needed that will, that determination, and to move between the madness and the magic aspect. I mean, so you can say for the magic, like to get it to work, you need will and determination and concentration to get everything to work in harmony. They needed to be of one mind. But then you can also go to the madness aspect, which is, to get it to work, you need to believe so fully that your mind can imagine anything.
That's two crazy people being crazy together.
Yeah. I mean, if you see it that way, it's like, shit, man, like she watched him die.
Yeah, one of them gets stabbed, and then he just goes like, no, this is the ritual. It's fine.
It's fine. Now things will start happening.
Yeah, it wasn't, you shouldn't have pushed me into that counter and driven the knife through my side, which you don't actually see. That is a clever way that the movie kind of makes it obscures things. It clearly looks like he misses the knife, like he bumps the back of it, and then in the next cut, it's just
inside and like deep inside him, like someone stabbed him almost.
Yeah, I have fallen down on a knife before, and it got about a half a centimeter into me before my body became made entirely of anti-gravitational material. I immediately jumped up. No, knives are no big deal. Or knives are a big deal. Yes. Knives are no big deal. It's fine. No, knives are a big deal, and I don't think that you would casually fall so hard onto a knife that it would just impale your entire body like that. It definitely does
not the way it happened.
No, it definitely does a good job of obscuring the details so that way you can sit here and argue about it with your friends about how real those things were.
Oh, like the ghost or whatever it is in the chair smoking. I mean, that was such a cool scene.
I love that so much.
It's like whispering things to her, and
I kind of wish we had the subtitles on for that too, but then I kind of don't. Like, I think second watch,
I've done it before. There's another scene where it's like inaudible. Oh, where the angel is speaking. It just says inaudible.
Okay. That's kind of my thing there. It's like, is it supposed to be just like maybe lightly whispered stuff, or if you hear it, it might give you some sort of at least a thematic idea of what this creature's intent is, or is it just going to be inaudible?
I had a friend who watched it and said that he could hear some of what was being said, and it was like really interesting. And I've tried to listen to it a couple times with the sound turned up, and I really haven't gotten much.
Okay, for sure.
He says something about her son when she's coming over, and that's pretty much about it.
I just needed to hear that one quote with subtitles on to make sure that that's what he said, because that was what I heard. But
like, but a little boy really say? Yes, he would. Well, if he was a demon, I guess. Or
definitely.
One of the damned.
Or if you just teach him.
You could just teach him. I mean, that would be the more obvious choice. So we talked about truth and how important it was for the ritual and how much she was lying. But then also Joseph was lying, right? Like he was really intent on completing the ritual. And his point that he says in that delirium at the end where he's dying is that he wants to become invisible, and he wants quiet before the howl, which you assume is death, which is interesting. You know, you always think of death as silence or darkness, or I guess if you're more religious, hell or heaven. So describing death as the howl is kind of interesting. But he wants to become invisible, right? And be separate from the world. And to complete this argument, I would say, you know, as far as her being in conflict with her own desires, he's in conflict because he wants to be invisible, disconnected from the world, and yet at the end it's clear that he wants to see his family again, his sister, which is the exact opposite. He wants to be connected to the world, to his family. He misses his family.
Well, given his...
A little bit of a stretch, but...
No, actually, honestly... given his antics, as we've previously discussed, this man may not have the most clean past. There may be some forgiveness he needs of himself because of some things, maybe some reasons why his sister may not want to see him. There's definitely a lot of mystery surrounding the Solomon character.
There's that one moment where she's telling him about what happened to her son, about the ritual. Or like he was her son was pulled into some ritualistic magic. And he goes, "Oh shit, I hope I wasn't part of that." And she goes, No, you weren't. Like, the fact that he's not sure for a second is a little concerning.
I kind of was hoping that in the visuals they kept showing that there would be some sort of indication about what his magical little ritual was like. I don't know. That was morbid curiosity. I was like, "Wait, hang on. How was this little boy ritualistically killed?"
Right. Well, she has that dream about the witch taking her, or an old woman. She never describes him.
And she sends him off in what looks like some Floridian bog.
Like there's a bog next to the house, and he
was wrapped in like caution tape or something like that.
It looks like that.
Yeah, and she just like sends him, and that's the first time they show that too. As far as I'm aware, I don't believe they showed that shape of a small body wrapped in some kind of yellow tape, which coincided with her forgiving. So I have to assume that's her pushing off her son, but they leave you in the dark about so much.
I thought it was Joseph, or Solomon, the wizard that she had wrapped up. And the yellow, I remember the first time, like, what is he wrapped in? He's constantly wearing this like yellow thing around his neck that's like a sarong or like a sari or something. And I assumed that that's what she wrapped him in. He's like wearing it around his neck sometimes, and I think he wears it once, like as a robe.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I think so. I think what happened there for me was as soon as I saw the guardian angel, I mean, actually, honestly, before that, once the house starts really decaying, I was already in like pure, this movie can just go metaphorical spaces. Like we've talked about Mother while we were watching the movie.
Yeah, right.
I was ready for each cut to just basically be a new universe for all I know. It's anything can kind of happen. So I assumed we were watching. This body she was pushing away right as she was talking about forgiveness. I was honestly just going like, well, that's clearly her son, and she's pushing him away because she's able to move on and get on with her life. No, that makes way more sense. She was disposing of the body that was definitely in that house.
Joseph, disposing so she doesn't go to jail later. Yeah. And then it's like it just submerges in the water, like it's taken. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Just like the way he's like taken.
Yeah, that was cool.
As I do a visual thing for an audio medium, right. Man, I love that, and I'm sure that if we saw that in theaters, that would be a big gasp moment. Where just the hand reaches down and pulls them away.
Oh my god!
Yeah, that what? Because this was released on Netflix, right? Was this shown in theaters?
That is a good question. I haven't done any research on that.
Okay, because that is a dimension to horror movies. It's pretty important sometimes. I think that there are scenes in Hereditary that were very special because I saw them in a theater. And in fact,
on a big screen where you can see everything. And
with an audience as well.
Okay, yeah.
And the new Evil Dead remake, nobody is ever going to have as much fun as the people who saw that on opening night.
So all of the gasps and the screams and the giggles right after.
There's a dimension to it. And so I think that definitely would have been a real stinger moment where there wasn't even a musical cue. It was a very subtle but very creepy, kind of a chilling hand just reaching up and just going like, I'm just going to take this.
Yeah. There's something about movies, and specifically horror movies, when you see with an audience, there's this bonding thing that happens where, all the scary moments, and then there's something about the scary moments where there's like a couple laughs right after, where this catharsis of terror and then humor about it. Like, yeah, we're in a movie. It's okay. But then also when the lights come up, the credits go and the lights come up and everyone looks around like, wow, we just experienced that together. There's something powerful in that for sure.
Yeah, I think it has to do with how emotional horror movies are.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned earlier about how The Exorcist didn't really scare me that much as a child because of where I was with it. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't form a true bond with it. Mm-hmm. Horror movies in general don't really scare me all that much. Now that I've grown past being 8 years old to the point where, I don't believe that those scarabs might actually just show up, just happenstance.
Yeah.
No, now that I have, a big boy adult brain to understand real life, horror movies don't, like, scared isn't the right word. It's more like they communicate their message in such artful and interesting and chilling ways. Like I would say being chilled and creeped out versus being scared, that can still come. And it's not dispelled by making jokes and stuff like that, which is why we're able to sit here and just kind of like, normally it would be reductive to joke about the hand reaching out and pulling the body away. Uh-huh. If your premise is that you have to be emotionally scared to enjoy the movie, which is why I can't enjoy a lot of the like Conjuring type movies because there's no emotion invested into it for me.
It's all about being scared.
Yeah, it's all about being scared, and I can't, and they can't get it out of me. That the level of creep in this movie, the level of malevolence that hangs over everything, because he acts like it's this big holy. Well, I mean, he doesn't act like that at all. Actually, it's really more maybe my own upbringing, because I was raised in a Christian family.
Okay,
no longer anymore, but I probably imprinted some level of holiness onto this ritual that he actually was describing as being kind of like both. Like it's we're opening the door. We're not inviting specific people over. We're just opening the door. Is how I would describe the level of interaction he has with the other side.
I love the way he describes things. The writing in that aspect was really cool. Like he talks about like she brings up the Kabbalah and he's like, that's just the grammar, and then he talks about the structure and the really interesting way to talk about magic. The other side is like Harry Potter and stuff like that. And I won't knock Harry Potter, but there are like rules and there are no rules in Harry Potter. And in this, it's like all about the rules, how there's this vague understanding and they're just like sailing into the unknown. And that's part of the creep aspect that I really like. Being sent off kilter and like, what's happening? Even though you have all of these rules, having rules and then casting them away really gets to me in that. Yeah,
and I like that you can kind of follow that same line of thinking with the concept of an unreliable narrator or an unreliable ritualist. Because, he's already introduced the fact that he's capable of lying. He's probably capable of being wrong, too.
Yeah.
I wonder how many steps of that process didn't actually have to go the way they did, and they just did because he's either creepy or he's just imperfect. He's an alcoholic. There's all kinds of different factors that play into the many flaws this character is, and you just kind of wonder how much extra suffering Sophia had to endure because of him being who he is.
Right. It reminds me of the story, and I don't remember where it comes from, but it has to do with superstition. It's superstition. When you do something just because you think that's the right way to do it, but you have no explanation for it. So there's this woman who is cooking banana bread, and at the very end, when she cooks the banana bread, she cuts off one of the ends, the heels of the end of the loaf, and throws it away. And later down the line, her family's like, why do you do that? And she's just like, that's what you're supposed to do when you cook banana bread. And then she asks her grandmother later down the road, why do we do that? I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, why do we cut off the end and just toss it away? And her grandmother says, well, otherwise it wouldn't fit into the serving pan. Like it was too long. And so, I mean, that's how superstitions start. Like, people do something for a particular reason, and then it gets passed down, and then it means nothing, even just a generation afterwards. So, he has all of these rituals, ways of doing things, but is it right? Probably not. I mean, for all we know, there's like a very simple way to do this ritual, and they could have just done it in 5 minutes, and they could have all gone home and lived.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you were right about the level of purification being important. So maybe that's mostly what they had to sustain, because she met that requirement, whereas he didn't, and but they could have probably gotten rid of some of the torture.
Maybe, yeah.
Like she goes through some stuff as a result of this, and then they do a fun montage version to explain how they do it at least twice. The third one, I'm not sure if they did it a third time, or if it seemed like a different ritual a third time around.
Yeah, so it feels like they do it the first time, and she gets pissed, like nothing's happening, and he's like, we have to do it again, and she's like, no way, like that sucked. I don't want to do that again. And he's like, we have to. And so they start to do it, and then he gets stabbed. It's unclear if they start over again after that, but they definitely don't finish.
Yeah.
He's like, we're just going to try to do it. He clearly doesn't have the concentration anymore, and it just spirals out of control.
So I'm gonna reach really far with this right now.
Okay, reach, do it.
So you've got written here on the board here, Sophia gains the power of forgiveness. She is able to move on. She chooses life. Joseph chooses invisibility or death. This is a way that people approach trauma in life. If you've ever been through the kind of thing that just kind of rocks your whole world, it can be anything from a loved one dying, a breakup, just anything that shatters the foundation of what you consider to be your life. There are two general ways to go about it, and that's miring yourself in it, letting yourself be overcome by it, and just choosing to suffer through what you're dealing with. And then there's, I don't want to say getting over it, because that's a very general way of putting it, but it is kind of just getting over it. It's realizing that the best way to deal with the way that your life is now as a result of losing this important thing is to actually make that life as good as possible. So, Solomon chooses to abandon the concept of having the life that he wants. We don't know why, and I still think that there's a possibility that it's because of extra dark reasons. That because he wants to reconnect with his family, and it's just, there's very few reasons why you're connecting with your family would be difficult. He is an alcoholic, so maybe it's a lot more simple than I'm making it out to be. Yeah. But there's that one scene, and I don't know, that one scene would be really weird if he doesn't have other dark things in his past.
I think there's no doubt. Yeah.
There's some that he is not a perfect character. Oh boy. You kind of like him for a while, and then there's that one moment where it's like, well, you can't. It's going to be hard to redeem that.
Yeah.
Humans cannot forget the past. They're incapable of personal forgiveness. I guess it depends on what exactly you mean by that. So I'd ask you to expand on that.
Okay. Yeah. So that's sort of one of the last sections I want to talk about, which is forgiveness, which we've said is, established is really important in the movie. And it's obviously pretty clear. She talks about it constantly, forgiveness. I don't do forgiveness. And then she gains the power of forgiveness. And so I would say there's two subtypes of forgiveness, which is godly forgiveness, which is very, very strict. God either forgives you or he doesn't because of rules that God has put in place. So in godly forgiveness, there's sin, and in some religions you can ask for forgiveness, like Catholicism, and you can be forgiven, or you commit one of those mortal sins and it's like, sorry, you're screwed. It's over. You're going to hell. And then there's the forgiveness of man or humans in the law respect, which is more like a godly version. And then the personal respect, which is I forgive someone for something. And that's all emotion. Although even in the law, there's an emotional aspect to it. As much as we'd like to separate it, there's definitely emotion in
at least in sentencing.
Yes, at the very least in sentencing. I would argue that forgiveness makes sense on a godly level But on a personal level, forgiveness is a bit of a conundrum because it's all about letting something go. Like, you do something to me and I am deeply hurt by it. And so I eventually say, well, I forgive you for that. We're moving past that. And when you say I'm moving past that, we're saying that act happened in the past. I'm forgetting it. It's like it didn't happen. But as a human, that's impossible. We're constantly remembering things that happened in the past, and we're constantly judging people, even though we may not want to. And to say that you are acting and thinking things and doing things with this person despite this thing that happened, despite this thing that you claim you forgave them for, would be a lie. You're lying to yourself, is my opinion. To tie that back to the movie, when, that's one of the most truthful things she says, I don't do forgiveness. Well, technically, no human does, in my opinion. And so when she asks for the power of forgiveness, it's actually like a big ask. And the angel kind of smiles like, wow, good wish, And she gains this godly power, which is, I forgive Joseph for being a dick this whole time. I forgive those people that captured and murdered my son. And lastly, I forgive myself. And she can actually do those things. She can actually forgive and actually move on with your life. Like you were saying, I mean, to say I just get over something is a poor way of saying it. You never really get over something. It just sort of absorbs into your life like two water bubbles. They just sort of absorb together, and then it just is. But you can't let it go.
I think then I don't want to say, because disagreement is too misalignment. Misalignment. My misalignment with that perspective, I think, is because I really like it. I especially like the idea of attributing actual forgiveness with divinity as being unattainable by humans. I think it's just an interesting idea. I feel like you can kind of turn it in a different way. Maybe these two things aren't mutually exclusive, where you can say you've moved on from a trauma, but it's just because you want to move on from a trauma. And it takes a certain amount of healing and honesty and reflection to actually have moved on. Obviously, you won't truly forget it, but you can get to a certain point where it doesn't bother you to the point where it actually impacts your life. And I think that is sort of what she had asked for. Not necessarily a divine power, but just something that she wasn't capable of doing. Something where she wasn't able to let go of all these negative emotions because she's been mired in so much negativity. And I don't imagine that spending however many months they spent in that house doing awful things to her, she got into a better state of mind. And I guess that maybe coincides more with the idea that it could have been madness versus magic. The
ego death. Right?
Yeah. If she really, I didn't tie those two things together. If she didn't really ask an angel to learn how to forgive, then the idea of forgiveness being divinity kind of doesn't work, because it means that she's still broken at the end of the movie, which it can be, that says something in and of itself, and there can be some things to be said about that. This is a great movie as well. I like that, is because it's got branches.
I'd say, yeah, at the end in Madness, you can go one of two ways. You can see it the positive way, which is like,
she crazied herself into positive mental health.
Yeah. Like, I know some people, there's studies, or I don't know about it, but you can take psychedelics and, you, like I was saying, the ego death, you have this experience and then you come out the other side and you're like, hey, I'm all right, So you can go the positive way, like she induced some sort of psychological trauma, which instead of making her go insane, brought her to some sort of fulfillment. Or you could say, wow, she took a situation and made it way worse. The manslaughter and all such.
Yeah, which would make it a more horrific movie, I do have to say.
Yeah, not very positive.
No. But I like that none of these things feel entirely prescribed. The movie doesn't explicitly answer your questions. It really does leave things, which I mean, it kind of almost contradicts what I said when we started this part of the thing. But I will stand by what I said initially, that the movie does have an ending.
Yeah.
It's just you're not quite sure maybe what the ending means entirely.
It's personal, right? I think, like you were saying earlier, there's a bit of an unreliable narrator situation going on. Even that moment where she hears something and then you see that person walk across, nondescript person in like a trench coat or something, walk across a doorway. She sees that too, out of the corner of her eye, just like we do. And I don't think there's any one moment where we're seeing something that they're not. So there isn't that separation, like it's real, it's not real. It's all in their mind. It's really happening.
It does feel as though it's mostly from her perspective, though. Like, I'm trying to think. I've only seen it the one time. Aside from the moment when he drowns her, during which nothing crazy happens, actually. That's the only time I can think of off the top of my head where we see his perspective but not hers.
So, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a time where gold is raining down on her and she's looking up and he's looking up, which kind of seems to indicate that he's seeing something. Two, there's the flowers on the ground, which she finds and she's like, oh, did it blow in? And he's like, no, it's happening. And then the bird hitting the window, which is sort of, birds hit windows all the time. And then the last thing that I can think of off the top of my head is when she's talking to her son the first time through the door. And he's like, let me out. There's a dog in here. And he collapses on the floor because at that point he's dying from that infection. And he says to her that wasn't your son. And you can take that as either he heard it or he just heard her speaking and through the delirium inferred what the conversation was about.
Yeah, they do a pretty good job of just smoke screening the whole idea.
And I love it. I love it so much.
Because it allows you to have the either or, but it also maintains that if we are going madness ending, that would be a crazy movie.
Yeah. Literally crazy.
It's so crazy.
Two people who are driven to want something incredible just drive themselves to insanity.
Mutually insane.
Yeah.
Just a shared psychosis. I mean, that happens.
So anyways, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else you want to...
Man, I guess we didn't talk too much about the sense of dread.
Yeah, the music.
The music. We've not mentioned the music whatsoever.
I don't know if it's a cello or what, but that string instrument where they're pulling the bow across the string and it just makes that grinding
note. There's lots of grinding, lots of chugging, lots of... It sounds like something catching across a string. Mm-hmm.
Almost like a factory or something.
Yeah, I know nothing about music, but man, the music in that movie was different and spooky.
Mm-hmm. Different, and I appreciate that. That is definitely a dread-inspiring aspect of the movie. We didn't talk about the cinematography, where you were saying like, wow, this is like a bunch of just beautiful shots, huh?
Oh, it starts out immediately. The very first shot of the movie is just these really great cloud formations. It's a wide landscape shot, and you've got what almost looks like a desert, but I think that's just because I don't know what Wales looks like.
Right.
it's
green hills is all I can think of.
They were more gray than green though. It looked dead. So like I was immediately thinking like somewhere out in the desert, especially with those clouds. Mm-hmm. But then everybody had a funny accent, and she was sitting on the right side of the car, and I kind of put two and two together. Eventually, she says they're in Wales.
Yeah. Although they mention Ireland both in the beginning and the end, like it was some sort of Irish film association.
Oh, yeah.
So they may have been in Ireland. I don't know. I don't look those things up.
Like actually where they are. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Okay.
But Ireland, Wales, like...
I mean, geographically, they're not that far off, but who knows what the difference is. Not this guy.
No.
But it's this really great shot because it's got that overcast, gloomy sort of mood to it where it's so
washed out in the beginning.
It's washed out, but then the vibrance of her blue car starts tearing across the bottom of the screen. Like it's just a beautiful movie.
The colors are very pronounced. It makes the colors really pronounced. The reds and the blues are powerful.
And they do lots of great things with camera perspective in this movie to kind of make you feel a little extra crazy. The fact that she just hates chairs. I don't know what her deal is. She is chronically sitting in not a chair. Usually the ground. Sometimes it's on a stair. She sleeps on the ground. I don't think they explained why she had to sleep on the ground.
Well, I mean, if you left your son at daycare to sleep with another man and then he got captured and was used in some sort of ritual sacrifice and you went insane and hired a wizard to perform a ritual to get vengeance on those people, then maybe you wouldn't sit in chairs either.
You know, that's a pretty valid point.
Oh, thank you.
Let me go through the life experience real quick, and I'll tell you how I feel afterwards.
Let's do a study, see if it's repeatable.
So we got to find at least 30 people.
Right.
The fact that she's always on the ground actually means that the camera is often at a lowered perspective, which definitely makes the already large house seem a lot larger, even though it doesn't seem like they really move around a whole lot in it. I feel like you only see a couple of rooms.
It's like the kitchen, and then the rooms feel really cramped and tall at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is a weird warping of reality.
And there were just all kinds of shots like that. Like I was actually looking on the left side of the screen during the drowning scene.
Yeah, I was expecting something to be there. I was looking like specifically to the left. I think you probably were too.
Yeah.
Just hoping there was going to be something there, which makes me think of Heredity too, where there's constantly like,
oh my God, I'm never going to get over the moment. It's just that scene. I have a habit of scanning just as soon as a new shot comes in. I just do that. And I saw her. I didn't see her immediately because my eyes didn't go top left because she's hiding up in the corner, because I knew exactly which shot we're talking about, right? Yeah. She's hiding in the top left corner, and so I see her almost right away, and you get that initial I'm not gonna make a noise in the theater because I'm a big strong man.
Right.
But then you get the little echo where just people are slowly realizing,
oh my God. Yeah.
It's just that's people noticing, oh yeah, she's up in the corner, and I was waiting for that to happen. And this movie doesn't really do that. It's got a couple of little walk by things, but it doesn't have any big, tremendous, traumatic scares. It's really more like you don't quite understand what's coming to you. And in fact, it almost reaches cosmic horror. The horror does not go away, I feel, when you see the guardian angel. If anything, that could have been the start of her problems. Like I was ready for her to walk into the bright light and then maybe see the angel, and then as soon as it speaks, maybe her head would explode or something. Like I was not sure what to expect from this movie, and it left me on the edge of my seat in that way. And the fact that it ends with her more or less kind of getting what she wanted, or what she didn't even realize she wanted. Right.
It was like a journey to discover what she really needed to move on.
This movie has a happy ending, and the level of happiness really is only dependent on how much you ultimately cared about Joseph Solomon. That's really the clincher on how happy you consider this ending to be.
Well, I mean, I guess it could be happy if you like Joseph Solomon, because I mean, you could say, man, that guy was a miserable bastard, and death was like a welcome. He just needed to get dead because life was miserable.
That's where he belonged.
Yeah, in the ground, or in the bottom of a bog, I guess, whatever that was.
He'll probably stay really well preserved. It'll be great.
Yeah, wrapped in caution tape.
Or his jacket. We're not sure at this point.
Was it a sarong? What was that thing? Thanks for listening to our conversations on this episode of Couch Theater. My guest this episode is Tyler Standifird. Artwork by Rupert Lee, or Robot, who you can follow on Instagram at 20th Century Robot. All episodes are written and produced by me, Stefan Cowper, along with a few questionable baselines. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, all under Couch Theater. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you come back next time for another movie and another conversation.